Monopoly is generally considered a dirty word, but to be labeled as one is sometimes just a backhanded compliment. And if that's true, then SpaceX was just complimented a bunch of times. For example, Vikram Neelamalluri of investment bank Lazard can be recently quoted as saying, "Having such a dominant launch service provider is probably not healthy in general for the commercial prospects of the industry. No one wants Monopoly choking off one point of the value chain." Maybe his quote is puzzling, but he added his reasoning for the concern being, "If you need to pay the piper and go with SpaceX, and they tell you they can't do anything till 2028, how are you going to satisfy your customers?" For those who follow SpaceX closely, you're probably thinking what I'm thinking, that SpaceX has demonstrated the ability to react quickly to last-minute launch requests and has exhibited great willingness to work with direct competitors in the satellite broadband service sector, even absorbing launches meant for other rocket companies. A good example of that is when Arianespace was unable to fulfill its agreement for OneWeb satellite constellation. OneWeb turned to SpaceX, and within a year, their satellites were in orbit. SpaceX had an indirect response to the criticism, with Tom Ochenero, the vice president of commercial sales, commenting, "I think we've proven that we're a launch company first. We're here to provide launches. We will move Starlink launches out of the way as needed." Another instance of SpaceX's unbiased nature is the launching of EchoStar's Jupiter 3 satellite. But off the record, company executives have been saying they've already been facing pressure from SpaceX's competing satellite service, Starlink. On the record, though, operations chief at EchoStar Paul Gass has said, "Really, you have to be practical about what's demonstrated and going. SpaceX's launch division has shown it has capacity and flexibility, setting it apart." The quote perfectly describes why SpaceX is successful, but it must be a difficult choice broadband satellite service providers are needing to make, essentially giving money to a market rival just so you can try to compete, though with slower speeds and smaller coverage. A sensible take on the market dominance of SpaceX came from Luca Rosentini, the CEO of D-Orbit, a customer of SpaceX's transporter missions, who at the World Satellite Business Week conference said, "Let's face it, SpaceX is probably the monopolist right now, not because they wanted to, but because many other situations that created this scenario. The situations Rosentini was referring to are a mixture of cautious development, setbacks, and other delays the launch industry as a whole is experiencing. The most recent setback being Rocket Lab's Electron, when its second stage failed to ignite during the launch for Capella Space, resulting in a total loss of the satellite. This anomaly would be Rocket Lab's third in its history for launches with a customer payload. As of September, no update has been provided by the company for the return of its Electron rocket to service." Another player in the launch industry is the tried-and-true United Launch Alliance, but maybe they aren't ready to compete just yet because they retired their Delta IV Heavy rocket and have stopped selling launches on their Atlas V vehicle, leaving only the up-and-coming Vulcan Centaur rocket, which during testing ruptured a propellant tank. This would push back the new rocket certification flight, with pundits guessing it might launch by the end of the year, and would still require another certification sometime in 2024. When it does start regularly launching, though, its manifest is booked with Kuiper satellite launches for some time, which means it won't be addressing the needs of other commercial customers. Then there's Jeff Bezos' rocket company, Blue Origin, who has great ambitions in the heavy lift market, and the space community anxiously awaits their New Glenn's rocket's first launch. Senior Vice President for the New Glenn, Jarrett Jones, spoke at the satellite conference and expressed confidence in fulfilling its obligations for launching Amazon satellite constellations, saying, "We're not concerned about meeting the contractual requirements for Kuiper," adding that Blue Origin is targeting 2024 for the inaugural launch of its rocket system, along with additional launches that same year. Even with this player added to the space game, it'll only be contributing perhaps 8 launches a year, with much of that devoted to the aforementioned constellation. How about the European Union? Surely the continent has some launch capability? Well, kind of. The Vega by Arianespace just launched last week, but it is the second to last flight of that system, and the Vega C is the planned successor. The issue here? The Vega C's second flight last December failed when the second stage experienced an under-pressured anomaly, and it has yet to fly again. But this isn't Ariane's only rocket. It has a much larger one named the Ariane 6, which is to have replaced the Ariane 5 that just also retired. Eric Berger of Ars Technica doesn't anticipate it taking off until the middle of next year, forcing EU customers to work with SpaceX with a caveat that when it does start launching, the Ariane 6 will be costing customers more than expected. To better show how SpaceX has cornered this market and has saved America's space industry as a whole, this handy graph was created by X-user Ken Kirtland17 and shows a comparison of US launches with and without SpaceX, along with Chinese launches. Should SpaceX have never existed, it's obvious the launch incumbents, especially the US defense industry, don't have the will and vision to innovate and lead the US into the next generation of spaceflight. An X-post from Elon Musk is fitting commentary as to why rocket companies move so slow, cost so much, aren't reusable, and launch infrequently. The post said, "Countries and companies aim too low. Their lack of ambition is their shortfall. The mission of SpaceX is to make life multiplanetary. Even slightly succeeding in that goal results in crushingly good performance to Earth orbit." So instead of being concerned if SpaceX is a monopoly, more should think like the CEO of Momentus, who was quoted at the satellite conference, conveying concern for the entire launch industry, saying, "A fleet-wide disruption to the Falcon 9 for an issue of some kind will have a ripple effect through the community." The implication being, if SpaceX were to experience an anomaly, the business of spaceflight will grind to a halt.